A question that seems to be tormenting society and feminists over and over again is to what extent women are being stereotyped in movies. Various feminists, like Laura Mulvey, argue that women are occupying uninteresting, dull roles which exist just to support their male counterparts, and in this video we will try to examine to what extent this is true. The 1920s was a period that women were presented in all kinds of forms, but mainly as innocent, modest wives who were staying home to raise their children while the man was working. In a 1923 film called The Smiling Madame Poutot, the wife is clearly trapped in a loveless marriage with an oppressed husband whom she tries to kill, but she changed her mind in the end. Madame Poutot portrays all the oppressed women of the time who were afraid to initiate a divorce, as their husbands were the ones who were maintaining them, as it was very rare for a married woman to have a job at the time. Another breed of woman which appeared in the 20s was the flapper girl, who collides with the conservative, quiet woman that ruled the society at the time. The flapper girl was a modern, young, sexually open and sociable woman who was in the workforce and did not feel the need to have a husband, and was exemplified by Clara Bow in the film It. Even though this new unconventional type of woman was loved by the female audience of the time, society was not ready for such a big change in the role of women, and therefore the flapper girl was long gone even before it appeared. After the appearance of the flapper girl, it was the turn of the vamp girl to appear, which represented a more dark and sexual breed of woman, which was usually depicted as the third person in a marriage or as seducing men and then trying to lead them to their own destruction. In a 1927 movie called Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, the vamp woman is directly compared to the innocent virgin wife, and at the end, the strong bonds of family win over the seductress. Movies in the 1930s did not depict women as sexual objects and were emphasizing on their inner emotions. Hilarious comedies and musicals were on peak, which gave to women more challenging roles, and especially in comedies, they were given for the first time the opportunity to equal men in films, even though there were still movies like Camille, which is probably the most romantic film of the golden age, that eroticized woman, making her the object of desire. In the 40s, while melodrama was on peak and millions of women had returned to their housewives' roles after their husbands had returned from war, films started to focus on women's issues like domestic life, motherhood, family, romance, and self-sacrifice. In Casablanca, a woman who is torn between her ex-lover and her husband is portrayed as a victim of her womanly emotions, a characteristic that frequently accompanied women in the movies of the time. A new genre of film was flourishing during the post-war era called film noir, which delivered a new breed of unconventional woman called the femme fatale. A femme fatale was a powerful, sexual and smart human being who did not support the conventional roles prescribed to women by society and manipulated men in order to gain power, money and independence. Femme fatales almost always get punished in the end by either ending up in jail or losing their minds like in Sunset Boulevard, or be killed like in Out of the Past. A type of woman that thrived through the 50s was the blonde bombshell. A bombshell is a term used to describe a sexually attractive and glamorous woman, which was typified by Marilyn Monroe. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell are the objects of male gaze from the very beginning, as the Olympic team at the dock stops and stares at them while they are entering the scene accompanied by an orchestral piece. The end of the Hays Code in 1960s resulted in producing more sexually liberated movies, which led to more complex and adult roles for female actresses, like the role of prostitute which Jane Fonda portrays include. Movies like Sound of Music and Mary Poppins provided a different approach for women, showing them as nannies, which enhances the family portrait the society had built. Movies like Breakfast at Tiffany's show the exact opposite, as Hepburn portrays a woman who goes to New York City to avoid to get married to a man with 3 children. A movie that can describe successfully all the stereotypes that were attributed to women of the time is the 1966 film called Alfie, where the protagonist portrays a womanizer who is in a relationship with 4 women simultaneously, but never promises to marry them. Alfie constantly degrades women as he refers to them as it or bird and talks about them like they have no value. Some of the greatest box office hits of the 70s, as Jaws, Star Wars, Superman, James Bond and Godfather, were excluding women from main roles, making blockbuster a man's world. Most of the times when women are seen in such movies are either sexualized or victimized. During the 1980s, the idea of woman in the kitchen was left behind, as women were trying to gain power in the society, something that was portrayed in some of the films of this era. A trend for films of this decade that was never seen before was to create movies which were stereotyping women and either convert them or give them power to prove themselves to the male-dominated world they lived in. Even though hit blockbusters such as Top Gun, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Back to the Future were still stereotyping women as the victim who needed to be rescued or as a love object, in Alien, Ripley's character is totally conflicted with the stereotypical gender roles that followed women throughout the history of cinema. 1990s women started to gain more status in movies as they did not portray only the wife or the love affair of the male protagonist, but they portrayed more complicated roles like doctors, paleontologists, hackers, and FBI cadets. Nevertheless, there were still hit romantic comedies like Titanic and You've Got Mail, which portray women as emotionally unstable, looking for a man to complete them. Even though women had larger roles compared to the roles they had in the past, they were still underestimated by their male counterparts, especially in movies like The Silence of the Lambs. The male gaze can be traced in scenes where the camera focuses or lingers on women's curves, which degrades women to the status of a sexual object. Male gaze has been established in modern cinema, especially in blockbuster action movies such as Charlie's Angels, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones and James Bond movies, where women wear provocative clothes which highlight their curves and therefore degrading them to the status of an erotic object. Modern cinema, which began to take form a decade ago, reinforced stereotypical views of women as erotic objects and men as masculine protectors, especially in blockbuster movies like So What and the Huntsman, the Batman trilogy, and the Avengers. The movie Erin Brockovich brought on screen a new type of woman who managed to demolish all the gender stereotypes of women in society, as she is the one who is working, whereas her boyfriend stays at home cooking and taking care of her children. Women have been and still are stereotyped in different ways through decades, but now they are more powerful and independent than ever, which leads them in finally occupying interesting and complex roles in movies where they are not victimized or overpowered by men. This leads to the conclusion that indeed women are being stereotyped in movies, but they are improving through time, and as historian and Professor Stephanie Kuntz said, women have come a long way, but still have far to go.